One unique experience I think that we had a number of years ago gives a sense of how God works through these events from one church to another. And I was planning for a renewal event down in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I was praying about who would be a great pastor to preach that event. And that's always part of this planning is who does God want to be on a team and to be part of a renewal experience. And the name of Joe Mullen kept on coming to my mind. He was the pastor of First Presbyterian Church in Greensboro, North Carolina, a very large church of about 5,000 members and all. And I had visited with them earlier in the year, but they had kind of felt like, well, we're big, we're successful, we really don't need this renewal experience. But I called Joe anyways, and I said, Joe, would you consider and pray about being the preacher for this event? And he said, it's impossible. He said, my schedule for the next 3 years is already firmed up in terms of speaking engagements and all. I said, well, that's fine, but just keep that in mind. Well, I had hung up the phone, and it couldn't have been 5 minutes later, and Joe Mullen called me back, and he said, Joe, you won't believe this, but my secretary just came in after I hung up to tell me that my speaking engagement that weekend had just been canceled. And he said, I've got this feeling that the only way I'll ever really find out what a lay renewal is like is by going on one. And he said, so I will commit to being the preaching pastor for that weekend. And so then I said to him, I said, now Joe, I got one other requirement for you. You must bring a lay couple from your church to talk about your ministry there and to let people know that you have an effective ministry in Greensboro. And he said that's interesting you mentioned that, because as soon as you said that, a couple came to mind, and he said, I'll invite them to come. Well, a few months later, we were beginning that lay renewal down in West Palm Beach, and Joe had come as the preaching pastor, and the couple that came along were Jim and Imogene Hagner. And when they got there, however, they said, now we're going to stay in a hotel. We're not going to stay with people's home. And I said, well, that's your choice. And they said, we're going to kind of be observers. And so they kind of sat back for the first day or so. Well, the second day into the lay renewal, they came to me and they said, you know what, we're not going to really get a feel for this unless we can stay in a home. So we switched them over and we put them into a home. Well, about 2 days later into the renewal, I went up to Jim one day and I said, Jim, I'd like you to share your testimony tonight. And Jim Hagner said, no, I can't do that. And I said, why not? And he says, because I'm a counterfeit. He said, I've been going to church for a long time, but he said, I don't have the faith in Jesus Christ that I see the members of this team talking about. And he said, it would be an embarrassment if I were to get up there. And I said, well, Jim, I want you to do this. I want you to pray about this tonight, and I would like to have you share your testimony tomorrow. And he looked at me and said, well, you want me to have a sleepless night, don't you? And I said, yeah, if that's what it takes, Jim, that'll be okay. Well, the next morning he came to the Bible study, and his eyes were red and blurry-eyed, and he came up to me and he said, well, you got your wish. He said, I didn't sleep a wink last night. I was up all night struggling and wrestling with the Lord. And I said, well, are you gonna share your testimony tonight? And he said, yeah. He says, I don't know what I'm gonna say, but he said, I'm gonna do that. And that night, his wife, Imogene, got up and shared how she had prayed for years and years for Jim and her desire to see him come to faith in Jesus Christ. And then Jim got up and he started by saying, his first words were, he said, I want you to know what you're looking at is a counterfeit. He said, I don't have what all these other team members have. I don't have a faith in Jesus Christ, even though I've been going to church for years. He said, my pastor's in a minute is going to come up here and preach, and he thinks I'm a Christian. But he said, but I've been faking it all this time. But he said, I want you to know that as of this moment, I'm giving my life to Jesus Christ. And I tell you what, there wasn't a dry eye in the whole place. And Joe Mullen, his pastor, had to get up just a few minutes later. And Joe got up and he walked up there. And I didn't think he was going to be able to preach that night, because Joe was so impacted by that. But when he got up there, he said, one of his first words were, he said, if nothing else happened by my coming down here, then my being able to see a young man in my congregation have come in faith in Jesus Christ, it's been all worth it. And as a result of that weekend, the next weekend, we went to Greensboro, North Carolina, and I did a leadership retreat there. And that pastor then led his congregation into a lay renewal. And in that lay renewal, some 2,000 members of the church gave their lives to Jesus Christ. But it was all because God had put a particular name on my heart, and then it put a particular lay couple on the heart of Joe Mullen. But that's kind of an example of how things happen. And we can't plan those things. It'd be impossible to plan them. But God knows what he wants to accomplish through the different renewal events.